Wild America is made possible by this station and other public television stations.
Marty Stauffer has written a companion book to
Persia in the mountains of northern Iraq. The women here used to enjoy the luxury of washing machines. Now they wash their clothes and their dishes in the muddy stream that runs through the camp. It's not easy to live cold and hungry up in these hills, or even to spend 2 days here as we did. But the Kurds have no intention of leaving this hellhole until someone, the United States, the United Nations, someone, guarantees that cousin Mohammed and all his cousins will be safe from Saddam Hussein and all his soldiers.
Has New York Senator Alphonse been using his influence to get government grant money for his political contributors? The Senate Ethics Committee wants to know. So does the Justice Department. And so do we.
Are you not going to answer any questions for me, Senator? You will talk about Saddam Hussein, you will talk about Israel, you will talk about the Baltics, you will talk about Gorbachev, you will talk about the Kurds, and he hung up on me.
If you flew Hawaiian Airlines during a 3-month period last year, you were flying an airline that the Defense Department had determined was not safe enough to fly troops, and the General Services Administration blackballed as too dangerous for federal employees to fly.
It's just God's miracle that they have not had a major accident. But the way that they run things, it surprises me why they didn't have one long ago.
I'm Mike Wallace.
I'm Willie Safer.
I'm Ed Bradley.
I'm Steve Croft.
I'm Leslie Stahl. Those stories and Andy Rooney tonight on 60 Minutes.
It has all come so far. Today, our engineers can crash test cars on a computer. If only they could have seen us 40 years ago. We had no idea we were inventing safety science. Most people today know nothing of all this safety pioneering, but I think Mercedes drivers, they know. I think they can feel it.
They're right. New Diet Dr. Pepper does taste more like regular Dr. Pepper.
So let's have another.
New Diet Dr. Pepper. There's no stopping the taste.
I can fix it so that every time you talk on the phone, you'll accomplish something. You'll help clear the air, the sea, and perhaps save a tree. Because Sprint will donate a percentage of your monthly long-distance phone bill to help clean up the environment. Is Sprint doing this to get your business? What difference does it make? They're doing it.
When you own the business, you can't afford to waste time.
That's why the employee owners of Avis get you into your car and out of the airport faster than ever. With Avis nonstop Preferred Express service. No counters, no paperwork. Preferred Express, we're trying harder than ever.
No matter what's going on in Washington and Baghdad to solve their problem, the hundreds of thousands of Kurds still up in the mountains have no intention of coming down till they're sure they're going to be safe. Who are they? Who are the Kurds? And why the outpouring of sympathy for a people few of us had ever heard of? They certainly aren't the first people to flee a dictator, certainly not the first to take to the hills. What makes them different? Television is what makes them different. There's no way you can ignore 1 million cold, hungry refugees when they're in your living room night after night. We couldn't. That's why we spent 2 days and 2 nights in one of their camps. The camp near a town called Chukurja spills out over both sides of the border between Turkey and Iraq. What we found here was the city of Dahak. It used to be 50 miles away. But one night 3 weeks ago, almost everybody in town left in a panic and came here to this valley. A month ago, Dahak was the size of Kansas City, Kansas, or Chattanooga, Tennessee. All the people fled because they were afraid that what happened in other Kurdish cities would happen in theirs.
So we're forced to leave Dahak.
You think they deliberately
see,
drove you out?
Yes, and we think that when they came to the Hawk, they'll kill us all as they killed about 120,000 Kurds in Kirkuk and in Toskhormatu. Men, women, children, everybody they catched.
Everybody they could catch?
They could catch. They killed it.
His name is Masum Mai. His whole family is here, except one son, who's still in Saddam Hussein's army in Iraq. And you have no idea where he is right now?
I have no any idea.
Masum was an English professor in Dahak, wealthy by Kurdish standards. Today, his family, 150 strong, live in tents on a dank and dirty riverbank. How old are you?
I'm 53 years old and 1 month, and 13 days also.
13 days?
Yes, exactly.
But you feel you've lived a good life?
Well, I hope.
You have lived a good life?
Yes.
Masum's daughter, Vian, was also an English teacher. In Kurdish, Vian means love. The Mai family staked out their own spit of land. The newest member, cousin Mohammed, was born in this tent 2 weeks ago. 4 weeks ago, these kids were in school. And these women were loading their washing machines, not squatting down to wash in the brown water of the river. Now you had 3 televisions.
Yes.
A VCR.
Yes.
Telephones.
Yes.
And now?
Now nothing.
Among the few things the Mais were able to bring with them were photographs of the life they left behind in Dahak. This is your living room.
My living room.
And this is your...
My mother, yes.
With the car?
Our car.
Yes, our car.
Okay, let's see what else.
We had a car.
What is this?
Oh, this is the college, inside the college. Because they were...
With Saddam Hussein's
Well,
picture?
Saddam Hussein, Saddam Hussein, every places were. We've been forced to take his picture, to fix his picture in every place.
Even in your homes?
Even in our homes.
Yes. A lot of the Kurds who ran away from the ever-present Saddam were teachers, lawyers, civil servants. The middle class, like the middle class everywhere.
They don't know how to survive in the nature. Huh?
Christian Commencé is a French doctor working in the camp.
They are not peasants, they are citizens.
What do you mean they're not peasants? Where are they from? Tell us.
Oh, they come from cities, small cities, large towns. Huh? They cover all the slices of the society. Huh? We have butchers, doctors, engineers, right over there. Huh?
Who are these people from Dahak? Who are the Kurds? Well, there are people who have been long persecuted. Most of them, like Saddam Hussein, are Sunni Muslims. But these people are not Arabs. They have their roots in Europe. They are as distinct a people as the Italians or the Russians, with their own ancient language and customs. They are a nation. They just don't have their own country. They never have. They call this place Kurdistan, and they came here 2,000 years before Christ. But for most of that time, they've been under foreign domination. Despite a promise in 1920 that they could have their own country, just 1 year later, the British and the French divided Kurdistan into 4 pieces.
One piece for Turkey, another for Iraq, another for Iran, another for Syria.
And since the 1920s, the Kurds have been in an almost constant struggle for independence. In the 70s, they counted on the United States and Iran to support them in an uprising against Saddam Hussein. When Richard Nixon and the Shah of Iran withdrew their support, hundreds of thousands of Kurds fled Iraq. When you look at the newsreel pictures of that exodus, they look hauntingly like the pictures we've been watching for the last 3 weeks. And just 3 years ago, Saddam dropped poison gas on them and destroyed thousands of their villages. The U.S. protested, but did nothing to help. Kamal Ibdara, a school teacher, says nobody cares about the Kurds.
The Palestinians are better than us, because at least they have Arab countries, 20 Arab countries are helping them, they are sympathetic with them, they are supplying them with political support. Maybe they have no one.
Certainly not the Turks, who see the Kurds from Iraq as potential guerrilla fighters who could incite the millions of Kurds who live in Turkey to rise up and fight for a state of their own. So in the camps today, the Kurds are treated cruelly by the Turkish soldiers who stand guard over them.
For families.
Four families,
For
22
families,
people in
yeah.
this blue tent.
Yeah.
One of the things you learn in this camp is that a lot of the Kurds worked in Saddam's government. We were surprised that a lot of them served in his army. You were a doctor in his army that invaded Kuwait.
Yes.
Dr. Faisal Dosky treated wounded Iraqis in Kuwait. He then escaped and came here, where he works in a medical tent and treats sick children hour after hour after hour.
Are these children going to die?
Yes.
Every one of them?
Yes. Many of them.
My problem is to try to keep alive one baby, if I can.
Right, as much as possible.
Not to let him die.
A stream of children, some too sick to cry, visit the European doctors who volunteer to work here through a French relief organization, Doctors Without Borders. Despite all the best efforts, a lot of people here are dying. Reinhard Biel, a Dutch nurse, says 25 babies die every day from diarrhea.
Well, there's no water over here. There's only that little small brook, and you know what happens there? There's the people sitting and cleaning their feet, cleaning their clothes.
Also using it as a latrine.
And 1 meter further away, there's a mother giving the baby water.
So the baby's drinking
Right, the same water that is passed.
toilet water.
Right, but they have no other choice.
They have no choice?
And they know that it's wrong. They know it.
What
and
would we do if we were run out?
We would be in the same situation. We would the same. We would, if you don't have a choice, you do it.
What should we do? You and me, if we should live in this mountain, what should we do?
That is something you think about a lot as you walk around and see little kids who look just like the kids you see at home. Blue-eyed blondes and redheads with freckles, all living in a valley that became a teeming slum overnight. The stench is overpowering, and it's a constant fight just to stay alive. U.S. military planes parachute in food rations. One airdrop lands dead center on a tent. Miraculously, no one is hurt.
She shouted for everyone to leave the tent.
She could tell that it was coming?
Yeah, because she knew about
The morning we arrived, there was a near riot when the food trucks came, the strongest men grabbing and hoarding. That afternoon, the U.S. military met with a group of elders from Dahak to try to establish some order.
The helicopter.
Yes.
All the helicopters come to this hill.
Then the people
it means that the other hill, they cannot get anything.
Understand how it works.
By the very next day, an orderly food distribution system was working. The camp had been divided into 7 sectors, each with a leader. No more bread wars. On our first day, everyone was using dirty water for cooking. But the next day, after the Americans organized the laying of pipes to carry clean water to one part of the camp, women stood politely in line. When we left, the refugees were working to make the camp more livable, building stone fences around their tents and patios. Even a black market had sprung up in cigarettes and sodas and canned tomatoes. But the camp is still a garbage dump.
Why are you here?
I don't know.
You don't know why you're here?
No.
Do you want to go home?
Of course.
Right now?
Right now.
Do you want to go home to Dahak?
Yeah,
she does.
Everyone knows it's impossible to stay here. But what are their choices? Sons Magid says she'll go back to Dahak only if the U.S. guarantees her safety.
Sure, we too want to go back, but with the American soldiers, with the American army, in order to be in peace.
So you want the American army to bring you back and stay there? Is that what you're saying?
Okay, we will help the American army, and the American army will help us. So it's a kind of cooperation between us and them.
But many, like Saeed Mohammed, say never, as long as Saddam Hussein is in power.
I prefer dying here to go back to Iraq if Saddam's still in the reign.
Relief workers say there's an emotional pattern in camps like this, with the survivors going from periods of elation to bouts of depression and despair because of the boredom and the sense of loss. The Kurds of Dahak have no idea when or even if they can recover the lives they once had. But the people we met haven't given up hope.
I've met a lot of people from Dahak.
Yes.
And every time I say, you're living like this, it's terrible, they smile the way you just did and say, yes, we have nothing. And then you smile.
Yes, because this is ironical, I can say it.
You see the irony in it.
Yes.
We smile because we have saved ourselves, our souls, our spirits. You see?
Let me ask you, now that you're here, what your dreams are. You lost your dreams?
Today, I have no any dreams except to return to my town, to my village, to my land. And to see myself live as a human being with my old people.
What about your dreams?
Yes, I left my dreams at the boundaries of Iraq, at Dahak. Yes, now I have no dream. I have nothing, only to return to my home, to my brother.
It's tough not to get caught up in the emotion of a story like this, and you try hard not to. But you do come away hoping that cousin Mohammed and all his Kurdish cousins grow up under the watchful eye of someone other than Saddam Hussein.
If you don't have AT&T 800 service and trouble hits, who knows how long you could be out? Only AT&T automatically protects you through the 800 assurance policy. With AT&T, you would be guaranteed back in touch in 30 minutes or less. With anyone else, who knows? But if you do have AT&T, your 800 service is guaranteed. That's not all. Since AT&T connects calls 25% faster and has the fewest block calls, more 800 calls get through, so you can make more sales. With all that, why choose any other 800 service? Better service, better results. Another AT&T advantage. Call now for free installation.
If you order a suit designed around the way you're built, you have to wait about 2 months. If you want a house designed around the way you live, the wait is 2 years. But if what you desire is a car designed around the way you drive, you don't have to wait another day. The 1991 Acura Legend Coupe.
The Amish deacon.
You think I'll allow you to shame me?
Did he commit a deadly sin?
What happened in the barn?
Murder, she wrote. Then, 3 women are dead.
What does this have to do with my Uncle Charlie?
He could never do it. What should she believe? Mark Harmon, Shadow of a Doubt, tonight.
A vacation is defined as pleasure, excitement, and rest. Mark McEwen finds it in San Francisco on CBS This Morning.
Dallas, Friday. Trust us, it ends with a bang.
Republican Senator Alphonse D'Amato may soon be facing the fight of his political life. Not from a Democratic opponent, but from the Senate Ethics Committee and the U.S. Justice Department. In recent months, both have been investigating the junior senator from New York, investigating allegations that he has used his influence to favor campaign contributors and clients of his brother's law firm. For years, D'Amato has successfully deflected these allegations. But with the Senate Ethics Committee hearing expected shortly, his seeming invulnerability may be vanishing. He is up for re-election in 1992, and like most ambitious politicians, Al D'Amato is happy to talk about almost any subject, foreign or domestic.
We want to see to it that when someone is arrested, why, by God, they not be paroled back out onto the street.
We simply could not allow Noriega to continue.
It's time, Mr. President, to blow the whistle on Saddam Hussein.
But there is one thing the senator doesn't like to talk about, the scandals his name has been linked to. Case in point, allegations of hanky-panky in his hometown of Island Park, Long Island, back in the 1970s when Al D'Amato was the town supervisor. He was a hard-working supervisor who delivered the goods for the folks there. For instance, back in 1979, the town wanted U.S. government money for some housing, and town supervisor D'Amato got it for them from HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development. 44 houses that the federal government would help low-income people to buy. The Island Park town clerk was Harold Scully, and he says the HUD money was a big help to some folks in Island Park.
The federal government paid part of the mortgage payment.
Each month?
Yes, to the people who purchased the home, thereby making it affordable.
Right. Good program.
Yes.
The town put an ad in the local papers. Mail in your application, it said, and it will be considered in the order it's received at Village Hall. First come, first served. But what the townspeople of Island Park didn't know was that Harold Scully had already called some friends and relatives of his to get their requests in ahead of the pack. And, says Scully, town supervisor Al D'Amato tipped off his friends, too.
The distribution of the homes were rigged.
The federally subsidized homes, 44 of them.
Right. Telephone calls were made to tip off the people who were to get the homes, to get their letters in.
People chosen by you, D'Amato, and the village officials.
Yes.
How many of the 44 homes went to people like that?
I would say more than half. The majority of them did.
D'Amato knew about it?
Yes, he did.
D'Amato took part in it?
When he came in and said he wanted his cousins to get homes,
yeah,
how else was that to be accomplished except by tipping them off?
Scully has told his story to the Justice Department and to the Senate Ethics Committee, who were looking into the possibility that a crime was committed in this HUD project. And while D'Amato insists he had nothing to do with the awarding of homes to insiders, that it was all Harold Scully's doing, Scully says there was no way it could have happened without town supervisor D'Amato's knowledge and consent.
If there was a mastermind and the person most responsible for the program in Island Park, it was Senator D'Amato.
Over the past few weeks, I've spoken with the senator 3 times on the telephone trying to get him to agree to an interview for 60 minutes. On the first call, I asked him about Harold Scully, and the senator's off-the-record reply was mainly a string of vicious obscenities about Scully. D'Amato said that he would do a live interview with 60 Minutes, but he would not be interviewed and then edited the way we have with virtually everyone on 60 Minutes for the past 23 years. I want to understand. You will not do the interview so that we can edit it the way everybody else does on 60 Minutes for the reason that you feel that we'll treat you unfairly, is that it? D'Amato told me he didn't want to be, quote, a target for 60 Minutes, and he refused to talk about those HUD homes in Island Park. He also refused to talk about allegations of his undue influence in getting HUD housing grants after he was elected senator in 1980. Allegations the Senate Ethics Committee and the Justice Department are looking into. Du Bois Gilliam was an assistant secretary at HUD, and he told us what he has told the Senate Ethics Committee, that at HUD, Al D'Amato was treated as someone special.
Senator Alphonse D'Amato was someone who was getting certainly a strong red carpet treatment at the agency, at HUD, and that if you wanted to move up in the system and become an assistant secretary at some point, or an undersecretary, or wanted to be a future cabinet member that reported to his committee, then you should be very, very responsive to his calls and his concerns for his constituents.
And how many other senators got the same red carpet treatment at HUD?
None. N-O-N-E, none.
Gilliam told us that when he spoke with HUD Secretary Sam Pierce about D'Amato's influence, Pierce told him he wanted to, quote, keep him happy and take care of Al.
He has always take care of Al. Take care of Al.
But Du Bois Gilliam also took care of himself. He took kickbacks from contractors who wanted to build HUD projects, and he served 18 months in prison for it. Gilliam says D'Amato was taken care of at HUD because of the clout he had as a member of the Senate Banking Committee, which controlled big portions of the HUD budget. He told us D'Amato staffer Jerry Blue would bring over the names of projects D'Amato wanted funded.
We walked through the process of how we're going to, number one, have these monies set aside for this member, how the grant application process will flow for this applicant from this community, and up to the point of how the funds will be sent out immediately.
Many of the projects D'Amato wanted didn't yet have applications on file, and Gilliam says he would make sure those projects would get HUD approval by giving them already filled out applications from successful projects, applications that they could then copy from.
It's a good copy for you to write on. All you got to do is take out the name and put in yours.
Gilliam told us that inside the agency, Senator D'Amato was sometimes referred to as HUD Secretary D'Amato.
Sometimes they say, well, Secretary D'Amato wants to get this grant today. And we'd all laugh a little bit and say, well, you know, he might as well be the secretary because he's sure benefiting a lot from what's happening over here.
The Senate Ethics Committee and the Justice Department want to know if Al D'Amato's influence was traded for campaign contributions. He has raised more than $7 million since his last campaign, which makes him a formidable opponent for anyone who wants to run against him. Michael Waldman worked for Senator D'Amato's last Democratic opponent back in 1986, Mark Green. And Waldman says the question is not how much influence D'Amato had at HUD, but who it was used for.
It's one thing to have constituent service. It's another thing where it's not constituent service so much as contributor service, helping the people who give you money rather than the people you represent.
Waldman now heads up Public Citizens Congress Watch, a Ralph Nader group, and he wasn't surprised by the names on this internal HUD memo listing building projects that eventually did get HUD money with Al D'Amato's help.
If you look at this list, this is a list of Senator D'Amato's requests. It's also a list of Senator D'Amato's campaign contributors. The one thing that every one of these projects had in common was that it was backed by or involved with someone who was a major campaign contributor to Senator D'Amato.
Let me see. Sackett's Harbor, Spring Valley, Puerto Rico, San Juan Housing, Bay, Amon, all of these Senator D'Amato's requests had no record of an application on file, and they were all projects sponsored by, if you will, or developed by, or contracted for contributors to Al D'Amato.
Absolutely.
This Spring Valley project was partially owned by New York developer Sheldon Goldstein. According to Federal Election Commission records, Goldstein and his family gave at least $7,000 to D'Amato's campaign, and political observers say that he helped raise much more money. Contractors in line to build the Puerto Rican projects helped raise $18,000 for D'Amato. Just 2 months later, those projects appeared on D'Amato's list, and soon after that, the Puerto Rican projects received tens of millions of dollars in HUD money.
People who've watched D'Amato's career know that there's a connection between who gives him campaign contributions and who gets favors from his office. It's very rare to have a smoking gun memo like this.
The Sackett's Harbor project on Senator D'Amato's list was built by a company called Jobco. The owners of that company gave at least $9,600 to D'Amato's war chest, and Jobco received millions of dollars from HUD. But Jobco also did what political insiders say is another good way to get D'Amato on your side. They hired the senator's brother to be their lawyer. Since his brother Al was elected to the Senate, Armand D'Amato's fortunes have soared. What was once described as a small suburban law office has tripled in size. And for Sidney Schanberg, a Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist and longtime political reporter for Newsday and the New York Times, who has covered Al D'Amato's career for years, Armand D'Amato's success in recent years is no accident.
The reason you go to that law firm is not because Armand is a brilliant lawyer. You go there because you think that his connections can do you good.
Schanberg told us about a client of Armand D'Amato, a defense contractor named Unisys.
His brother becomes the attorney for Unisys, which has large Pentagon contracts for communications equipment. Okay. Al D'Amato lobbies for Unisys. Armand, his brother, comes in to Al's office and gets a letter written on Al's stationery, signed by Al, to the Secretary of the Navy saying you ought to give this next contract, the one that was coming up, to Unisys. It's multi-million-dollar stuff. They get the contract. Al says, I didn't know my brother used my stationery. Impossible.
Unisys paid Armand D'Amato's law firm $188,000, and Unisys officials were major contributors to Al D'Amato's campaign. Unisys got at least $154 million in government contracts, and the Justice Department is considering a criminal indictment of Armand D'Amato for his role in using his brother's Senate office to benefit his own client. There are government tapes from an FBI wiretap of Unisys officials discussing how to hide, quote, the rest of D'Amato's pay, that is Armand D'Amato. And the Senate Ethics Committee wants to know if any part of the huge fees Armand D'Amato has gotten since his brother became a senator have already gone to or will eventually go to Al D'Amato.
Al D'Amato's reputation among mobsters. What was it? What is it?
He could be reached. He could be reached. That's what it was.
Henry Hill is a former New York mobster. When he was a gangster, Henry Hill came up against Senator Alphonse D'Amato, and they testified on opposite sides at the trial of this man, Philip Basile, a Long Island nightclub owner named by New York police as having ties to the mob. Basile was on trial for helping Henry Hill to violate his parole agreement by pretending to give Hill a job in one of his nightclubs.
He gave me a phony no-show job when I got out of prison. It was one of the conditions I needed to get out.
Hill eventually turned government informant, and he testified against his old friend, Philly Basile. But Basile had another old friend at that trial who testified for him.
His character witness.
His only witness.
And he was a character witness. Yeah. Was Senator Al D'Amato. What did he say about him?
That was his man. You know,
industrious, hardworking, first-rate, guy he's known for a long time.
Philly was hardworking. He was industrious. He also was a wise guy.
Why would a U.S. senator testify for someone police tell us is an associate of organized crime? Records show that Philip Basile was a major campaign contributor and a fundraiser for Al D'Amato, and he was a client of Armand D'Amato. But Basile wasn't the only such man Alphonse D'Amato went to bat for.
In 1984, he spoke with then U.S. Attorney Rudolph Giuliani on behalf of two men with even closer ties to the mob. Mario Giganti, who was seeking a reduction in his 8-year prison term, and the most powerful mafia godfather in the country at the time, Paul Castellano, who was later gunned down in front of a Manhattan restaurant. At the time, Senator D'Amato's office said he made those calls, quote, because of concerns brought to him by community leaders.
I mean, the whole city knows who these people are. You know, I find that's strange.
Since then, the senator has labeled himself, quote, naive for making those calls.
If you buy all of his explanations, then he was deaf, dumb, blind, and he's got an IQ of 23, and nobody believes that. In other words, he couldn't know anything. He doesn't know who's in his office signing his name. He doesn't know who everybody is, doesn't know they're important, they're influential. He doesn't know they have money. He doesn't suspect they're going to give him money in his campaign treasury. How could I know? I live in the back. I don't see anything. I mean, you have to believe that he's dead, really, that he died and went to heaven.
Senator, you will talk about Saddam Hussein, you will talk about Israel, you will talk about the Baltics, you will talk about Gorbachev, you will talk about the Kurds, and you can be edited. When it comes to talking about Alphonse D'Amato, you simply decline to be edited, and you keep talking over me as I'm talking to you right now. And he hung up on me.
Senator D'Amato held a news conference last Friday morning to try to defuse the impact of this report ahead of time. He called us assorted names, not unexpected and not uncharacteristic for him. And then he said he hadn't hung up on me. Yes, you did, Senator. A CBS News technician was listening.
Gillette presents Sensor, the system, the technology that will change the way you shave forever. Sensor, twin blades set on springs to read your face and respond. Independent suspension to sense and adjust to every curve of your face. No other razor comes close. Gillette Sensor.
One seat and take a companion along for free. Buy club class and we'll upgrade you to first. It's become a way of life in the air, but the question persists, If they're giving away all this free service, are they cutting back on maintenance to pay for it? The airlines say no. They brag about how well they maintain their planes. However, Hawaiian Airlines would have a tough time bragging about how it maintained its planes. If you flew Hawaiian Airlines during a 3-month period last year, you were flying an airline that the Defense Department had determined was not safe enough to fly troops, and the General Services Administration blackballed as too dangerous for federal employees to fly. Yet the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, not only didn't ground the airline, they didn't tell the public what a senior FAA maintenance inspector told us.
It wasn't a well-functioning airline.
Had you had the power, would you have let them continue to fly?
No, I would have suspended the certificate.
If you saw an airplane that you thought was dangerous, could you stop that?
Yes, the individual inspector, the safety inspector, has the authority to ground an individual airplane for a period of 5 days.
But when it comes to an airline, you can't ground an entire airline.
No, you can only make a recommendation.
How well trained were their people?
Some people had pretty good training. Other people had no training.
And these were mechanics servicing planes?
These were mechanics.
And Tom Seeley, who worked as one of those mechanics at Hawaiian Airlines, went further.
It's just God's miracle that they have not had a major accident. But the way that they run things, it surprises me why they didn't have one long ago.
On July 14th, 1987, Tom Seeley was working here as an airplane mechanic for Hawaiian Airlines, helping his partner with a routine tire change on a DC-9 when they discovered that a part of the main landing gear was damaged. Is that a big deal or a minor inconvenience?
It's a big deal. On a takeoff or a landing, you could have a wheel separation, which could cause this plane to go right off the runway and possibly flip over. It could be catastrophic.
Seeley showed that damaged part, a landing gear axle sleeve, to his supervisor.
We were told to change the tire assembly only and just forget about the sleeve. Just cover it up.
Seeley's partner refused to sign off to say that the proper repair had been made. He went to the FAA office here in Honolulu to tell them about the damaged landing gear that had not been fixed.
They took his story, but yet they didn't show up down at the hangar for until 3 weeks later.
He goes to the FAA and tells them that there's a plane flying in unsafe condition.
Yes.
They don't come out to Hawaiian for 3 weeks to see if his story checks out?
Yes, that's true.
The FAA inspector found that the landing gear part was damaged, just as Seeley's partner had said. The inspector also determined that Hawaiian's airplane had made nearly 1,000 flights in this unsafe condition. He proposed a fine of $1,000 for each unsafe flight, a total of almost $1 million. But he was overruled. The FAA proposed a fine of just $300,000, which could be reduced in negotiations with the airline. Meanwhile, Hawaiian continued to fly its airplanes.
So actually, this plane flew about 4 or 5 months in this condition. And the company didn't do anything to remedy it.
4 or 5 weeks?
Months.
Months. But when Seeley reported to the FAA 2 more DC-9s with damaged axle sleeves, they scheduled an inspection. However, before they could get there, the airline got rid of those damaged parts. The FAA decided to launch a full-scale investigation of Hawaiian. A special group was sent from Los Angeles to Honolulu. Heading up that team was Dave Colvin, a senior FAA maintenance inspector. And what Colvin's team uncovered, among other things, was testing equipment that had no record of ever being calibrated.
Take an altimeter, for example. If your calibration master is off, you could get to an altitude and not be at that altitude.
So you could be reading, I'm flying here at 25,000 feet and actually be...
At 30, see. Or you could be at 20.
Colvin's team also found Hawaiian's repair shops in a mess. Good parts, broken parts, and scrap parts were all mixed together with no tags to identify them. So what happens when you've got a mechanic trying to get a quick repair on a plane to get it back out into service? Could he take the wrong part?
He very easily could take the wrong part, install this on the airplane, and ultimately cause the airplane to crash in the worst scenario.
While Hawaiian continued to fly, the FAA gave the airline a chance to correct all those safety violations, or as they say in FAA jargon, to close them out. But Colvin's team, which found the violations, didn't oversee the corrections. They were sent home. And once again, Hawaiian was under the supervision of the local FAA, the very same group that had let the airline slide all those years. The FAA says clean up your act. Yes. Hawaiian Airlines says we've done it. The local FAA people out there in Hawaii check it, say everything's okay. The FAA gives them their good housekeeping seal of approval.
Correct.
And that was the end of it.
And that was the end.
But it wasn't the end of the matter. Less than a year later, the Defense Department conducted its own safety inspection of Hawaiian because the airline had a contract to carry troops. Their investigation found many of the same problems that the FAA had uncovered back in 1988 and said had been fixed. The Defense Department declined our request for an interview but said its report speaks for itself. The Pentagon concluded, and this is a quote, Hawaiian's maintenance program does not currently meet industry standards. What I don't understand is how could Hawaiian be given a clean bill of health by the FAA?
Hawaiian would send a letter back to FAA saying, yes, we corrected this violation, but the FAA never came down to visually inspect and see that this defect was corrected.
As you can imagine, we had a lot of questions for Hawaiian Airlines. We wanted to ask them about the allegations of shoddy or unsafe maintenance. However, they declined our request for an interview. That's understandable, but why would the FAA, the agency that's supposed to look out for the traveling public, refuse to be interviewed? An official of the agency said the subject was, and we quote, too complicated to be discussed on TV.
No, it's not too complicated a subject to discuss. Maybe too painful a subject.
Congressman James Oberstar is chairman of the House Aviation Subcommittee. He says in the case of Hawaiian Airlines, the FAA simply failed to enforce federal air safety standards.
There were problems, serious, deep problems in the maintenance program of Hawaiian Airlines.
Do you think that there are other airlines with Hawaiian's problems that the FAA has been letting slip through the cracks?
I know they let Galaxy Airlines go too long. Now, that was a two-bit carrier, admittedly, but it managed to kill 69 people. Somehow went on to get contracts with the Defense Department to carry spare parts. They were found transferring oil from one engine to another engine that had been leaking oil. And the Air Force reported this to the FAA, and still it was the FAA that shut this little two-bit carrier down. It was the insurance company that refused to extend their insurance, and the FAA finally shut them down. It shouldn't take that kind of action. The FAA ought to have a get-tough attitude.
And no one believes that more than Ken Mead, who heads the Department of the General Accounting Office that checks on the FAA for Congress. Over and over again, the GAO has written critical reports on how poorly the FAA is performing. Their latest report charges the Federal Aviation Administration doesn't always know if crucial repairs have been made or haven't been made.
For example, in the case of one airline, they flew two of their aircraft for 5 years with a defective landing gear.
For 5 years?
For 5 years. Now, FAA found out about the non-compliance with the airworthiness directive in that case because it was an accident. A landing gear collapsed.
Do you think that the FAA has the personnel it needs to do proper inspections?
I think that's a problem. We found that the FAA inspectors were getting half the training the FAA said their people needed. But just recently, the FAA is saying that they think this situation will continue on the training front for another 2 or 3 years.
We've been told that in these days of deregulation, that when an airline feels the squeeze on its profits, one of the first things to cut back on, because it's not so visible, is maintenance.
We are now in a period of severe economic difficulty for the whole airline industry. Every carrier is going to be losing money. And this is a time when increased, not reduced, vigilance is needed on the part of the FAA.
And Hawaiian Airlines has been an airline that's been in financial difficulty.
And that is a tripwire. That should send up the red flag immediately to the FAA, but in this case, they didn't take heed sufficiently of those warning signs.
Did Hawaiian pull the wool over the FAA's eyes?
I would say yes.
Is it possible that the FAA is trying to whitewash this whole thing?
It looks like it is to me.
The Cadillac Sedan DeVille.
The Chrysler, Fifth Avenue.
It's got a driver's side airbag, air conditioning, a powerful engine, available wire wheel covers, room for 6, dual electric mirrors.
As you can see, these two cars offer the same kind of luxury. More or less. Chrysler Fifth Avenue.
Get $1,500 cash back on Chrysler Fifth Avenue during our Rediscover America Sell-a-thon.
Hey, Mr. Alphonse, your graphites are here.
Who guarantees overnight air delivery on Saturday to more people coast to coast?
Thank you.
Who did you think?
UPS on Saturday?
When it comes to lawns, some folks say too much work, too much time, too much money. Now, if that's you, I've got the answer that'll make folks like us look like experts. Stern's Miracle Grow Lawn Food and this amazing Miracle Grow no-clog feeder. So easy, just drop in and spray on. It's so fast, you'll feed your whole lawn in minutes. You'll see healthy green growth in days. Miracle Grow Lawn Food and the Miracle Grow no-clog feeder. Beautiful lawns for folks like us.
So, I'm having breakfast with my buddies, and I order Kellogg's Bran Flakes. And right away, Scott says, "Problem, Dad?" Truth is, Kellogg's Bran Flakes taste terrific. It's this nutty, toasted wheat taste, and hey, come on, right? They're Kellogg's, right? So, I lean over to Scott, look him right in the eye, and I say, "Did you know a spoon can be a deadly weapon?" Oh! Yeah. K-double-L, O double good, Kellogg's Bran Flakes, toasted taste to you.
Who guarantees overnight air delivery on Saturday to more people coast to coast? Morning.
UPS on Saturday?
Who did you think?
Thank you.
Tonight, Andy Rooney is looking at some letters, not mail, but the letters of the alphabet.
About 25% of the mail I get is typewritten. 75% is written by hand. Half the handwritten letters are illegible. You'd think that was because there are a lot of dumb people writing me, but the funny thing is that the worst handwriting is done by the smartest people. There are too many different ways to write most of our letters in our alphabet. I think that's the trouble. Take the capital letter A, for example. Half the letters to me come this way. The other half make their A's this way. People go wild with their signatures, too. They think they're signing the Declaration of Independence. Here's a letter I got recently from Maureen O'Sullivan, the actress who looked so good swinging through the trees with Tarzan. She makes her A's look like E's. This is from Helen Gurley Brown, the magazine editor. Senator Inouye goes hog wild with his Y. Barry Goldwater goes up with his B. This is Senator Daniel Moynihan. You can't read that. Obviously, he's brilliant. Senator Bob Dole supposedly signed this fundraising letter, but here's the way his signature really looks. You'd never know, but this is Diane. Diane Sawyer. Fortunately, she put it on her own stationery. Whatever happened to Diane? Maria is Maria Shriver. I keep the letters from the beautiful women in one pile and the letters from the politicians in another. You probably wouldn't recognize this signature, Walter Annenberg. He was mad at me about something I wrote. Now I wish I'd been nicer to Walter. I notice he just gave $1 billion worth of paintings to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Here's a down-to-earth signature you can read. Jack Parr, Bob Newhart, Mickey Rooney. He wrote me a funny note. Wally is Walter Hickel, the governor of Alaska. To tell you the truth, I met Governor Hickel once, but I don't know him well enough to call him Wally. Politicians like to be known by a nickname. He probably hates Wally as much as I hate Andy. Would you like to guess who signs his letter with this? That's Henry Kissinger. And can you read that? This is a collector's item. H. Norman Schwarzkopf. Next time I get a letter I can't read, I think I'll write back in my own handwriting. I can't read that either.
The mail this week brought a slew of letters about our story on Japanese advances in high technology at the expense of America. And a lot of viewers thought we had only ourselves to blame. Our society expects immediate gratification for all our wants and needs. Companies which seek long-term growth are frequently at a disadvantage because the stock market and investors expect immediate results measured every quarter, not over a decade. We also heard from the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Subcommittee on Defense Industry and Technology, Jeff Bingaman. Bravo on your excellent report on the decline of this country's industrial base. I have long advocated that a coherent technology policy is essential for our long-term national security and economic survival. Incidentally, we reported last week that we tried to get anyone at the White House, to talk about the substance of our report, but they all declined. Well, perhaps it was a coincidence, but last Thursday the White House did talk about it. They changed a long-standing policy and pointed to 22 areas of technological development, many of which we'd listed in our report, which the White House said should be nurtured as critical to the national prosperity and to national security. Most of our mail was about our story about the land in Colorado that developer Frank Aries bought, then turned back to the savings and loan he borrowed the money from, which then failed, leaving the rest of us to hold the bag. One viewer wrote, "Quick, pass me 2 aspirin. Please do a segment on how we taxpayers can get on this gravy train and off the tracks." A lot of letters criticized us for picking on Frank Aries, like this viewer. You totally missed the point. Rather than tracking down and exposing Mr. Aries, you should have focused your efforts on the morons at the bank that authorized a loan of that magnitude. And this, you took the easy way out by finding a scapegoat for us in the form of a single entrepreneur. Maybe a more apt title for You Own It would be We Deserve It. And finally, your pursuit of the rich businessman with the nice yacht as the wrongdoer made you look silly and naive from a business point of view. Shame on you. By the way, we also heard from Frank Aries himself, who watched our story in Miami. He liked it. I'm Steve Croft. We'll be back next week with another edition of 60 Minutes.